Shalom, this is Avraham Shira from Eretz Israel, from the Holy Land of Israel. And we have a few hours here before Shabbat comes in, so it's a great time to sit down and learn a bit about Shabbat and the creation of time and space. Today, there are many aspects to learn about creation. At the beginning, we need a time and a place to live. God needs a stage upon which He will work out His drama. And so we're going to learn from the Sefer HaBahir of Rabbi Nechuniah ben Hakanah. It's one of the classic ancient texts of Kabbalah. And Rabbi Nechuniah wrote the book very interestingly in very short paragraphs, each one succinct on itself that you can learn by itself. And yet you'll see over a period of learning them that they are linked together and they lead us into what is called the Kabbalah HaKadmonim, the early Kabbalists, the people who had the earliest traditions of how this world became. And they wrote them down and they shared them with each other. And there very little was left of all their books. But we have the Sefer HaBahir, which is something that you can get in English with Hebrew, of course, from Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. It's a wonderful book. And so he's going to talk about the creation of the days of the week and Shabbat. And we'll see some interesting things, I think. He begins, this is paragraph 158 in the Bahir. Why is the Shabbat called the seventh? Now here we're numbering the Sefirot, the powers of the soul, the powers of creation. They're microcosmic, they're macrocosmic. They work and give life force to the soul of man, and they create and animate everything around us at the same time. They're non-physical, non-spatial, obviously, and they're also non-time. They are above time because God is above time. These are His traits. And so we ask, why is the Shabbat called the seventh? How do you know that? How do you number the days? From when? It is not, the Bahir says, it's not really the seventh. Interesting. What is he going to tell us? But it's because the Blessed Holy One rested on the Sabbath with the attribute regarding which it is written, for 6 days God made the heaven and the earth, and on the seventh day He rested, vayinafash. And literally He sold. It's a strange word. It's taking the idea of soul, which is a noun, and turning it into a verb, which is another form of rejuvenation or recharging. In other words, God Himself took a break from the actions of creation and renewed His own spirit, if you will. He rested and vayinafash, and He brought back new soul to Himself. So it's a really fascinating thing to think about, how you take a noun, an idea, and turn it into an action, which is a verb. You know, this is a lamp, right? I burned my frankincense here to protect us from Mr. Corona. It's a lamp. Now, how do I turn a lamp into a verb? It lamped. I don't think so. So it's a little rough. But there are words, of course, in English and other languages where you can turn. In Hebrew, it's found very often that you'll take a noun and make it into a verb or vice versa. But what you're really doing is causing a huge shift. It's not just grammar, okay? What you're doing is taking an idea and you're sending the idea into action. Okay, you're taking a static concept and you're making it happen. You're giving it power, movement, and influence. So Shabbat means to rest. But then he flips the verb over and says it's not just rest. It is renewal, recharging the batteries. Vayinafash. This teaches us that each day has a saying that is its master. What is he telling us? Each day of the week. Now in Kabbalah, we do not relate to the days as merely 24-hour segments of time, because the first 3 days of creation, there was no physical remnant in the sky, nothing to measure time with, a sun and a moon. We cannot measure time without some other moving body with which to measure our movement, because time is something that is created out of movement of space. If there's no movement, there's no time. So the interaction between space and time, space and objects, movement of objects creates time. So before the fourth day, before God created the sun and the moon and the constellations, there were no objects by which to measure any movement. And that's, of course, what time is. It's the measurement of movement. So what are we learning here? Well, he's telling us that each day has a statement that is its master. Now, what does that mean? A master in Kabbalah means the power to influence. Mashpia in Hebrew, the power to influence. If you have the power to influence somebody, you are as if to say their master, at least in that particular tchum, in that particular boundary. If you're a coach, you influence your players. If you're a boss, you influence your employees. In that context, you're a master. So there are statements, the 10 statements of creation, Vayi or, Vayi mavdil bein maim lamayim, etc., etc. Those Vayihis, each one is the master of a period of time. Because when God says something, it doesn't stop being said forever. It's continuously being said. But that's the nature of infinity. That God said, the Torah, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. Now he read that over to Moses. But he wrote it and said it himself in the beginning of creation. And it's still getting said today. And we need to relate to God's speech that way because it gives us understanding of other things. Like why on Rosh Hashanah we say, Hashem Devarcha Yatziv B'Shamayim, 12 times we say it. Right? God, your word is standing in the heavens. Now, what does that mean, standing in the heavens? Is it a billboard that never comes down? Well, not exactly. You can think of it that way. But it's really the creation of an energy permutation through the speech. That letters manipulate the light of God and create variations in energy. And those variations come out in our souls. It comes out if you're a man or a woman, if you're tall or if you're short. We call it genetics. But before the physical chemicals of the genes and the DNA, etc., are created in us, the concepts were already created long before. All right. So each day has its master, and that is its saying. So relate to words. When you talk about the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, relate to those words as concepts that are still effusing energy into the world every moment of every day. And that means inside us, of course. And that's part of the secret of Jewish meditation, is to attach ourselves to those words. Because then we can experience the life force that's flowing through them directly and not through all the filters that keep us feeling like we're separate from God. Because when you feel the life force flowing through your words, you will not feel separate from God anymore. You will understand what it means. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear Israel, God is our God. He is one. When you feel the words emanating inside you, you know what that statement really means. That we really are one. But unfortunately, we ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and that created duality, you and me, us and them, us and him. And so we're here to heal that in our consciousness. Right here is where we fix the universe and how we see the world. Because the world is one, we just see it as two. Okay, we want to fix that two-ness. All right, and this is not because it was created on that day. In other words, don't think of Sunday as the first day of the week or Tuesday. They are, if we count in our sense. But really, the Rebbe says like this, that this is not that because it was created on that day that Sunday is called first day because it was created the first day, but rather because that is what it, when it does the task which it was assigned it, excuse me, this English, it's called by the day of its task. It is not given its name because of its order, is what he's trying to tell us. You could say, this is my eldest son, this is my second son, this is my third, etc., etc. But their order doesn't mean that much. You know, you might study a little psychology, it has some ramifications, but the point is that the days are not periods that are measuring time, they're measuring activity. Each day has a task, and the task of each day is part of a developmental structure. And the developmental structure is starting from the cosmic, the macro, and ever increasingly becoming more and more precise and micro. Right? We start with the first day, we create light. We say, what do you mean create light? We say in the davening, Yotzer or Vorei Hoshech. It says he forms light. Light, which of course is God's light himself, is a pre-existing element. And then it says, Borei Hoshech, he created darkness. That in the beginning there was no darkness. Darkness needed to be created. He needed to turn the lights off in the theater before we could light the stage. So, the idea here is don't think of the days as little pieces of time in your week. Think of them as little activities that are happening at every level of creation. And when we go through the list, the first day God created, of course, we just said light, which really means he created darkness before, and then he shot the stream of Ein Sof, which we call the Kav, the line in Hebrew, literally. He created darkness, and then he started carving the darkness with what's called in the Zohar the lamp of darkness, the Botzina de Cardenuta, which literally it's a reverse, a counterintuitive way of creating, but he's carving the darkness with his light in order to create the Sfirot and the Partzufim and all the primordial concepts and forms and energy vessels that would eventually lead to us. Okay, because we are made with those. Okay, so that's the first day, is the creating of light within that created darkness, and the expanse between the waters, which of course means the heavens, the higher realms of heaven, the non-physical plane, and the beginning of the potential for the lower waters. Then he says the third day is the lower waters, and he created, of course, that gave a chance for land to appear, and then vegetation and trees, and I wrote down fruits and sprouts. You got to have sprouts. All of that was on the third day. The fourth day, we expand further. We say, now we're going to leave Earth, and God's going to create the firmaments around us, all the constellations and stars, and the sun and the moon, which, of course, is the beginning of our understanding of time. That we measure days by the Earth's turning, we measure months by the moon turning around us, and then we measure years by the whole system revolving around the sun. Now, so when we talk about Wednesday, don't think of it as the fourth day. Think of it as the day of the creation of the stars. Now, we're not talking, I personally hold by what Rabbi Dr. Gerald Schroeder wrote in his book, Genesis and the Big Bang, that there is a human calendar and then there is a divine calendar. God gave us the Bible with the human calendar because our mind can hardly conceive of more than 6,000 years in any kind of realistic way. Whereas when you look and you sit in God's chair, time is much different. And if you do the calculations that Rabbi Kaplan did, we understand that the universe, according to God's position, really is about 13 billion years. But from a human perspective, we're going to crunch it down to the 6,000 years. So there are two calendars, and it depends on, is it human-centric or God-centric calendar? And we need both those calendars, absolutely. And what modern science, of course, has shown us that that things appear to be much older according to the geologic record of the earth and things, other measurements of time. But regardless, not to even try to force anybody to believe the different ideas of these two different calendars. When you think of each day, Thursday, God created the birds and the fish and the animals. Oh, today's the day of the birds, the fish, and the animal energy. And Friday, of course, God created Chava and Adam as one, and it's the human energy. So there's ever increasing complexity of the forms and materials of creation. And you start from the simple and you get to the complex. And that pattern we see over and over. Okay. So what is the Bahir, Rabbi Nechuniah tells us another beautiful thing right now. Each day does its tasks and maintains its activities. And activities means the continuous outflow of the energies of those items on those periods of time throughout history. So that's why I'm saying, try thinking about the day as the day of the light, the day of the birds and the trees, the day of humans, etc., the birds and animals. The seventh day, therefore, comes and does its task. Now, Shabbos comes, the seventh day. Why is it called Shabbos? What's the task of Shabbos? Well, it's a beautiful thing. He says, Shabbos' job is to make all the other days feel good. He says, making them all rejoice. That all the other days of creation, they're not really rejoicing during the work week. I think everybody can attest to that. But Shabbos comes and everybody can be happy now. Everybody can rejoice with what you've done this week. And that includes even the days themselves. The days have this capacity to perform activities and then to rest and receive vayi nafash, to receive new life force. That the days themselves are just like you and me. They're receiving power from the Creator. Now, he's going to tell us something about this, a metaphor that's going to help us. And Rabbi Kaplan insists on using this word. It's very funny. On the seventh day, he rested and sold. Like Soul Train, what does this mean? He rested and sold. It's like you got your shoes done, you got a new sole on your shoes. Whatever, what is rest, he says? It is the absence of work, obviously. It is a cessation which is called Shabbat, meaning rest. So what is this like? He brings a metaphor. It is like a king that has 7 gardens. And the middle of one contained a fountain. And welling up from that fountain in the middle of that one garden of the 7 was a living source of water. Now, water is always a metaphor for life force, spiritual life force. 3 of his gardens are at the right of the fountain, and 3 of the gardens are at the left of the fountain. When it performed its function and overflowed, when this fountain overflowed, they all rejoiced. All the gardens rejoiced. Well, here comes the water. I think after a long, hard summer, that first rain, you feel don't you feel the earth is happy? Can't you sense it? The trees are waking up, the grasses, the bushes, the flowers, everything. So that's what he's saying here. The waters make them grow. I jumped a line. So the fountain overflowed and they all rejoiced. So remember, this is only a comparison to compare it to the days that are rejoicing on Shabbat. There are 3 days after Shabbat and 3 days before Shabbat. What we call Sunday, Monday, Tuesday are actually receiving the life force from the previous Shabbat. And Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are receiving their life force from the Shabbat to come. So really, Shabbat isn't the 7th, it sits in the middle of 6. Right in the middle. And it's that fountain that waters all 6 days of the week. But each Shabbat does the previous 3 days and the next 3 days. Okay. Like this garden when it overflows and it waters, when the fountain overflows and the water goes out to each garden. And the gardens, what do they say? Oh, it overflowed for our sake. It already ego starts to jump in, right? Even a garden can have ego, or a day, right? Self, identity. It waters them and makes them grow while they wait and rest. All right. So how does the watering take place? Is it all at once when the fountain overflows? Or is there an order to this? Is there an order to way the life force comes into the week? Do we then say that the waters are 7? But it is written, from the east I will bring your seed. This indicates that one of the 7 waters it. That there is one within the 7 that water all the other 6. Okay? And it really, your body also reflects this, that your heart and your lungs and your liver and your stomach, etc., all receive information from your brain. They're all receiving life force from the blood. But not at the same time, and not in the same, there's a pattern to the way they receive their life force from what you eat. The Zohar explains that the most refined food goes to your brain. The next refined food goes to your heart. The next refined food goes to your lungs, all the way down to your liver. And see, that's why the liver is the filter of the body. It's receiving the dregs of the food. And the brain takes only the highest, most refined part of your food. That's why the rabbis say in the Talmud, a very interesting thing, they say if you want to feed your brain, eat oily little fish. Sound familiar? Omega-3, little salmon on Shabbos. The Baal Shem Tov also says that salmon is the Shabbos food. Why salmon the Shabbos food? Because the salmon have to swim upstream to mate and spawn, etc. He says the Jews are always swimming upstream. Wherever they go, they're not going with it wherever they are. They're going with the Torah. And that automatically usually puts you against the culture that you find yourself in. So we can all call ourselves, Sammy Salmon. All right. So then he asks another question. We must therefore say that it waters the heart, that actually this fountain waters the heart, which is Tiferet, the center of your torso, and the heart then waters all of them. So the Shabbat is now compared to the heart. And the Shabbat, the heart, it's sending blood all the time. From the left side, the blood goes out. The right side squeezes, and then when it's empty, it opens, and then the blood comes in. So this is also a good way to understand the paradigm of Chesed and Gevurah, right and left, giving and receiving, because the heart's doing it all the time. Your heart is always receiving and always giving to the body. And as the blood goes out, of course, it's been oxygenated, so it brings oxygen to all the different parts. So here we see the Shabbat is kind of like the heart of the week. It's receiving from the previous 3 days, and then it's sending life force back out into the world on the next 3 days. Okay. Where does this take us? Well, Rabbi Berechia, and some say Rabbi Berechia is Rabbi Meir Balanes. There's a machloket about some of the identities of various rabbis, but we can handle the machloket. Whoever they were, they're worth listening to. Rabbi Berechia says, each day of the week we speak of the world to come. In other words, whether it's the day of the creation of light, Sunday, the day of the creation of the firmament, Monday, the day of the upper lights and the lower lights, Tuesday, etc. The third day is, of course, when the seas are created, so on and so forth. Each day talks about the world to come. Why? Do we then understand that we are saying in Aramaic? Do we understand what we are saying? In Aramaic, the world to come is translated as the world that came. It's very interesting transition here. We translate it and understand it as something that is yet to be. We speak of it in future tense, but the actual grammar speaks of it in past tense. Seems to be a contradiction. And what is the meaning of the world that came? We learn that before the world was created, Rabbi Berechia goes on, it arose in thought. In other words, before God created the world, he thought about creating it. Sounds like a very logical thing to do. Right before you create something, you think about it. So he thought about creating the world, and he wanted to create an intense light to illuminate everything. Because of course God, let's face it, he's the most intense light. So he wanted to create this intense light. He created an intense light over which no created thing could have authority. That's interesting, that the idea of creating light wasn't just to take away darkness, it was to create authority. It's an interesting thing. At the end of a long night, it's pleasant. If you're ever up at dawn, here comes the sun, right? That you're taking on light, it's warm, the day is happening, energy is rising, the grass is starting to stand up, everything's starting to move. But what he's saying here is that he's bringing on authority, that there's an authority. At night, the authority is hidden. And this paradigm is also worthwhile to understand. It's like a rock concert before the cops show up and after the cops show up, right? He created intense light over which no created thing could have authority. And the Blessed Holy One, however, saw that the world could not endure this light. It was too great of light. This is one of the greatest dangers of touching the holiness of God, because ultimately, if you touch too much light, you're going to obliterate yourself. You will die. You will be reabsorbed into the source. And we don't want to do that. We like it here. We just want to touch him. Get close, but stay here. He therefore took the seventh of the light. Now this is very interesting. He took 1/7 of that original light and left it in its place for creation. And he put the rest of the way for the righteous in the ultimate future. Now when this ultimate future is, there's much talk about this in the Torah and in the Kabbalah. Some say it's only 220 years away. The year 6000 is supposed to bring the 6,000 years of peace, bring on a 1,000 years of peace, according to the Kabbalah. By the way, that's where Hitler got his idea for 1,000-year Reich. And that's where all Messianic period ideas, Christian as well, derive this 1,000 years of peace. It's right here. But the Kabbalah is not satisfied with that. They say there's another 1,000 and another and another. And that the real creation is supposed to be 10,000 years long. Well, so what? What happens then? We all get obliterated? Not necessarily. But the point is that 1/7 of that original light, which is too great to receive, only we can handle 1/7. And so that's what we're trying to access now. And the rest of it is put away to the future. Now, why can't we receive more? Well, the truth is because we don't have the vessels to hold it. Right? We have to have very strong, grounded, mature, logical, patient, loving, kind, all the good qualities that we need. They need to be very strong to receive that light. And when our vessels are weak, well, we know what happens when a person gets too much light. He usually ends up in the wrong hospital. God forbid. But you see here, we have this source about the light put away for the future. And then the Rabbi Berechi went on, and if they are worthy of this second light, they can keep it. I will give them the rest in the final world. So you see, we have to be if we prove our worthiness for receiving 1/7, God will take care of the rest, and we'll get the other 6/7. And it's not like a geometry problem, of working fractions here. We're talking about the revelation of the infinite power. And so, when we learn, Rabbi Nachman teaches us that the power, the infinite power of God, the chief place to find it is in the letters, the Hebrew letters of the Torah. So how do you find light in letters? Well, that's why you have to learn. And you have to learn the concepts and learn the language the best you can. And therefore, he answers our original question, the world that came, since it already came into existence from the 6 days of creation. That the light that we're going after is really the light that was. That pre-existed creation at the beginning of time. We're trying to create a complete cosmic loop to get back to that original light. Regarding this is written, how great is your good, that you have hidden away for those who fear you. So when King David said that, he was talking about the great good that's put away, not the 1/7 that you can feel here. Now, halavai, we felt that 1/7 here, believe me. If we feel 1/17, we'd be doing pretty good. But I think the main idea, of course, is to first change the way we look at time, because we want to look at things the way God looks at things. You know, there's a phrase, Ayin ba'ayin yir'eh Elokim b'tzion. Eye to eye, we will see God in Zion. Now, most people think of that, oh, I'll see God. We'll look at each other. Very nice. Shalom, hi God. No. Ayin be'ayin. That his eye will enter your eye. That you will see the world the way he sees the world. That's the goal. So I want to bless everybody to open up our vessel, to change our way of thinking, to understand that God is within us. And we want to look at the world the way he sees it, and then automatically we'll have tremendous patience and mercy and love and strength and all the good traits that are on the tree of life. Because it's coming from within us. So when he puts his eye in your eye, you're not going to look at the world the way you look at it today. And it can happen for just a tiny moment. And it's just enough to change everything. So we should be blessed with the light of the Shabbat. Understand that this Shabbat was from the beginning of time, and it's feeding time right now. And every Shabbat is drawing from that original Shabbat into now. Because we're really from there. And we're trying to get back to there. Just like Joni Mitchell said, right? We got to get back to the garden. So Shabbat is a taste of that garden, and we're going back there. And we'll be there. And we'll see you then. Have a great Shabbat, and we'll see you on Patreon next week, and YouTube, Facebook, etc. All the best.